Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 49, and it is Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. If this is the first time that you're watching the show or joining the content, glad to have you here. If you're returning back from another episode or some other content, glad to see you returning and continuing to get your fix of Cyber Threat Intel. With that being said, if you need a snack or a drink to get you through the content, make sure you go do that first before we continue. And also, if you want to see the articles or read more about what we cover, as well as some other articles that we cover, then head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. You can find all that information on there. With that being said, let's go ahead and flip on over to my screen and hop into the content. All right, so first article here, new warm cookie Windows backdoor pushed via fake job offers. A never-before seen malware named Warm Cookie is distributed through fake job offer phishing campaigns to breach corporate networks. According to Elastic Security Labs, which discovered the new threat, Warm Cookie is capable of extensive machine fingerprinting, screenshot capturing, and the deployment of additional payloads. And this talks about the actual process of this. So the phishing campaign utilizes fake job and recruitment offers sent via emails with attention-grabbing subjects. They target individuals with touches of personalization using their names and those of their current employers. So they're not just sending out these templated kind of things. They're actually customizing it a little bit or personalizing it a little bit so they can lure their victims even more. The email contains a link that claims to be for an internal recruitment platform where the job description can be viewed, but redirects the user to landing pages mimicking legitimate platforms. This whole idea of going after job-seeking candidates is not new. We've seen a lot of different groups do this. We've seen especially North Korea as of lately really trying to go after this area where job seekers or employers even that are looking for candidates. To add legitimacy, those fake pages prompt the victim to solve a CAPTCHA before they download a heavily obfuscated JavaScript file, and they give a naming convention that it's similar to, so update underscore, and then some numbers with several underscores in different sections of numbers. Basically, it looks like a date format of how it would be in there. When executed, the JavaScript executes a PowerShell script that uses the background intelligence transfer service bits to download the Warm Cookie DLL file from a specified URL and then execute it via rundll32.exe. Warm Cookie payload is copied then to c/program data/RTL upload/RTL upload.dll. And upon first execution, it creates a scheduled task named RTL UPD that runs every 10 minutes. In the final setup phase, Warm Cookie establishes connection with its command and control C2 server and begins fingerprinting the victim's machine. So a lot of this malware, that is pretty typical. It will create a lot of times a scheduled task because in a sense that can be the persistence aspect of this. So when you go to shut down a process that's associated with it or kind of shut down whatever is going on or what you think is going on, what you detect, that scheduled task will then reload and it will just keep re-executing or reloading whatever the malware is so that attacker still has persistence even if you restart the system. A lot of times people won't look at the scheduled tasks, and that is kind of the downfall because you're thinking that you're kind of getting rid of it, but in fact, you're not. It's just re-executing whatever that is. So that's a great place to look if you're looking for evidence or indicators of compromise. Now, this talks about the capabilities for Warm Cookie, and it says it can retrieve victim information such as IP addresses and CPU details, capture screenshots using Windows native tools, enumerate installed programs via the registry key, execute arbitrary commands using cmd.exe and send the output to the C2 server. So the attacker server, drop files on specified directories and paths, and read the contents of specified files and send content to the C2 server. So pretty common stuff. All right, let's keep moving here. Next article, JetBrains warns of IntelliJ IDE bug exposing GitHub access tokens. JetBrains warned customers to patch critical vulnerability that impacts users of its IntelliJ integrated development environment IDE apps and exposes GitHub access tokens. Tracked to CVE-2024-37051, this security flaw affects all IntelliJ-based IDEs from 2023.1 onwards, where the JetBrains GitHub plugin is enabled and configured used. So if you're not familiar with JetBrains and that whole IDE environment, they make a whole bunch of different software applications or IDEs where you can develop code based on the specific language that you want to create. So very similar to something like VS Code, or there's a whole bunch of these different things out there. So really going after the development aspect of code development and production systems. So, and that's interesting too, especially as we start to go towards more of this code-based deployment structure, DevOps, those kinds of things. Those kinds of environments are very heavily utilizing code, utilizing these IDEs to push out code. So whether that's from the developers, whether that is from your DevOps team or your infrastructure kind of team, security team, whatever the case is, a lot of code is coming from those environments. So certainly if you can go after those kinds of environments and you can affect that code throughout that process, then that's a serious concern, of course. There's a quote here. It says, in particular, malicious content as part of a pull request to a GitHub project, which would be handled by IntelliJ-based IDEs, would expose access tokens to a third-party host. JetBrains has released security updates that address the critical vulnerability on affected IDEs, version 2023.1 or later. So they give a whole bunch of versions in here. Feel free to go check that out if you are using any of the JetBrains products. JetBrains also strongly advised customers who have actively used GitHub pull request functionality in IntelliJ IDEs to revoke any GitHub tokens used by the vulnerable plugin, as they could provide potential attackers with access to the linked GitHub accounts, even with the added protection of two-factor authentication. So two-factor authentication is not necessarily going to prevent this, that they're saying. Additionally, if the plugin was used with OAuth integration or personal access token, PAT, they should also revoke access for the JetBrains IDE integration app and delete the IntelliJ IDE GitHub integration plugin token. So whenever we're talking about tokens in general, one of the things that you should obviously be looking at is how long your tokens have been available or enabled, because especially with compliance requirements, best practices, and occasionally there are requirements in those different certifications that you should only have tokens available or enabled for so long. So something like 90 days, you might want to rotate those tokens and make sure that you are using fresh tokens just in case something happened. It's kind of just a best practice, but it's also a good security measure because, again, sometimes attackers aren't going to use the tokens right away. And if you're rotating them every so often, that's certainly going to help reduce your attack exposure instead of just keeping one token for, say, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Rotate those things and make sure, just like your password, it's the same kind of idea. You aren't going to use the same password in an enterprise for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. Because if you are, that is a terrible practice, and you're just asking to be compromised if you aren't already compromised. So that's a best practice, absolutely. So, and then of course, always update software whenever there is an update, that just makes sense to do. You're not going to leave a software version that's vulnerable for years and years, just like the password. All right, moving on here. Next article, Chinese hackers breached 20,000 FortiGate systems worldwide. The Dutch Military Intelligence and Security Service, MIVD, warned today that the impact of a Chinese cyber espionage campaign unveiled earlier this year is much larger than previously known, and that was in quotes. As MIVD disclosed in February in a joint report with the General Intelligence and Security Service, AIVD, Chinese hackers exploited a critical FortiOS and FortiProxy remote code execution vulnerability, CVE 2022-42475, over a few months between 2022 and 2023 to deploy malware on vulnerable FortiGate network security appliances. The coat hanger remote access Trojan rat malware used in the attacks was also found on a Dutch Ministry of Defense network used in the research and development R&D of unclassified projects. Still, due to network segmentation, the attackers were blocked from moving to other systems. So it's always a concern when you find any kind of Trojan or malware or anything like that in your research or research and development areas of your network, because especially if you're if you're developing software, developing products that are going to go to actual production, and you're not just kind of testing things out, you're going to, in a sense, maybe promote that, then, certainly that's a concern, because you don't want anything to be infected and then move that into a production environment. This is in general, right? So if you're using a development and test network, even just in normal operations, you have to be really careful about what is getting promoted, because obviously if that ends up in a production environment and it is infected or compromised, well, that's not going to be good. That's obviously going to cause more and more issues. So it's always, good to make sure that's not the case. The MIVD found that this previously known malware strand, which could survive system reboots and firmware upgrades, was deployed by a Chinese state-sponsored hacking group in a political espionage campaign targeting the Netherlands and its allies. This gave the state actor permanent access to the systems, even if victim installs security updates from FortiGate. The state actor continues to keep this access, the MIVD added. So that's always a concern when malware can remain after things like system reboots, firmware upgrades, anything like that. When they can maintain persistence, the attackers can maintain persistence, meaning that it doesn't go away. They can still log in or still access via whatever channel they were using. That's always a concern. Now, especially once you start getting closer and closer to the hardware, and that is the case, then it becomes even more of a concern. And that's why hardware vulnerabilities are extremely concerning, because a lot of times software vulnerabilities can go away, or you can wipe the operating system or whatever the case is. But when it's at the hardware level, then it's basically catastrophic, because it generally can't go away at the hardware level. And so that is, certainly of concern. And there's all these different levels within a system, within the operating system, that you have to be concerned about, because they're essentially, if you've ever seen the circles of trust, basically once you start getting closer to the kernel and then the hardware, closer to the bare metal, essentially, that is like a more and more serious zone if it's impacted. So it's all part of a lot of these security certifications that you'll learn about. If you haven't learned about that already, it's definitely in several of them, but it's an important thing to kind of understand too. Let's see what else. Since February, the Dutch Military Intelligence Service has discovered that the Chinese threat group obtained access to at least 20,000 FortiGate systems worldwide in 2022 and 2023 over a span of a few months, at least 2 months before Fortinet disclosed the CVE 2022-42475 vulnerability. CVE 2022-42475 was also exploited as a zero-day to target government organizations and related entities, as disclosed by Fortinet in January 2023. So, final point on this one, as far as your organization and who your where your risk is, who your threat actors that you have to be concerned about, that's all common kind of things that you would do in cybersecurity. So if you're just trying to get into the career field, this is one of those things that you look at, you analyze, you keep tracking over time, because you want to understand who your threat actors are, who those threats are, what those threats are, where your risk lies, because that will help you, in a sense, build your profile of how you're going to defend against those groups. And so that is such an important aspect of cybersecurity that people don't always think about. They think about the transactional vulnerabilities and not the big picture as far as building that profile and building that threat map, that threat register, in a sense. So hey, this group, this Chinese group, is going to come after us because we're a government, or because we are a small organization that makes very tiny widgets or something that they would not be concerned about. We know we don't have to worry about the Chinese state-sponsored group coming after us. So that's just kind of the thought process that you need to have in cybersecurity. And this is just a reminder, if you're already in cybersecurity, most likely you're probably already doing this, but it's always good to just kind of have that reminder, that gentle reminder that you need to be doing this stuff, because you do not want to be caught not knowing who your threats are or what your threats are. All right, let's keep moving here. BlackBerry Cylance data offered for sale on dark web. BlackBerry is investigating an incident involving Cylance data being offered for sale on the dark web, but the company says the data appears old and it does not originate from its own systems. Dark Web Informer reported last week that a threat actor is hoping to get $750,000 for data allegedly belonging to customers, partners, and employees of BlackBerry's Cylance cybersecurity unit. The endpoint security company Cylance became part of BlackBerry in 2019 following its acquisition for $1.4 billion. Remember when BlackBerry used to be big? I do. I remember when everybody had BlackBerry phones. That was a while ago, before the iPhone. Cyber criminals are claiming to be in possession of 34 million customer and employee emails. They claim to have obtained customer emails, personally identifiable information, sales prospects, and user and partner lists. I would say if you have 34 million emails, you probably have some sensitive information somewhere in that trove of emails, for sure. Based on our initial reviews of the data in question, no current Cylance customers are impacted and no sensitive information is involved, BlackBerry said. The data in question was accessed from a third-party platform unrelated to BlackBerry and appears to be from 2015 to 2018, predating BlackBerry's acquisition of the Cylance product portfolio. So they're saying that this is before we took over Cylance and we modified basically how things were being operated, the technologies maybe that they were using, or back-end processes. A lot of that stuff happens when there's an acquisition, is that you want to look at existing processes and technologies and see if that still makes sense. A lot of times when you're being absorbed into another company, not all that stuff makes sense, because maybe a larger company has better technologies or more efficient ways to absorb a company's processes and technologies and development, because that company was maybe smaller. They didn't want to invest in certain technologies, or they didn't have the funds to do that. There's all kinds of reasons why. But typically, a lot of the processes can be made more efficient when you're getting at scale, when you're dealing with larger budgets. So it's just something to keep in mind. But especially if you are going to acquire a company, you should be looking at potentially vulnerable areas, see if there's any indicators of compromise, essentially doing a risk assessment of that acquisition, and make sure that whatever you're bringing in that you can bring it in securely. And if you need to change things, you need to put some security measures in place. Sometimes you'll even isolate those specific companies and maybe put a firewall or something in between you, just so there's no like cross contamination of the networks. Article also says Emisisoft. EMSisoft. I'm not sure how that's how you say it. Again, all these names that I swear that I see in these articles are just so interesting as far as the pronunciation of them, that they're not always the easiest to directly pronounce the first time you see it. Threat analyst Brett Callow noted that the Cylance data may have been obtained as a result of the recent campaign targeting customers of cloud data platform Snowflake. According to Mandiant, this is for the Snowflake attack. The attacks are conducted by a financially motivated threat actor, and the user credentials leveraged by the hackers have been obtained by the info stealer malware from the systems of Snowflake customers. So we've talked about the Snowflake incident on this show, but definitely, if you're not tracking that, it's just good to understand that. It comes down to things like multi-factor authentication, and there's several things that have to do with that specific attack. But that does seem to be impacting a lot of major companies that were using Snowflake. All right, moving on here. Breach forums down, official Telegram channels deleted, and database potentially leaked. Both the ClearNet domain as well as the Onion dark web domain of the infamous breach forums appears to be down in a move that has confused both security researchers and cyber criminals. Attempting to visit these sites leads to a 502 bad gateway error. While the site has suffered several disruptions due to law enforcement attempts to take down the site, no direct connection has been made by law enforcement activities so far. And so we've actually talked about this whole breach forums thing on this show before, but this article says breach forums had earlier faced an official domain seizure by the FBI in a coordinated effort with various law enforcement agencies. However, shortly after, Shiny Hunters managed to recover the seized domains, which is the person that runs it, with allegedly leaked FBI communications revealing they had lost control over the domain, while the breach forum staff claimed that it had been transferred to a different host. So again, we talked about this on this show. Essentially what happened was breach forums had a splash page that was put up on their website. It said it was seized by the FBI, and then it also had pictures of the profile pictures of the admins with like prison bars over them saying that they had been arrested or that they were coming after them. And then, like this said, the website then, actually first, Shiny Hunter said that did not happen and he was not arrested. And then the website popped back up. Now this is saying that the website is back down again. So that is interesting. It's kind of this back and forth, right? On X and LinkedIn, security researcher Vinny Troa claimed that Shiny Hunters had made a direct message through Telegram indicating that he was retiring from the forums as it was too much heat and has shut it down. So apparently, supposedly, going in hiding. Shortly after the official domains went down, several official Telegram accounts that were associated with breach forums, including the main announcement channel and the Jacuzzi 2.0 account, were deleted. Forum moderator Aegis stated in a PGP signed message that Shiny Hunters has been banned from Telegram. I just find that interesting, saying that the person had been banned as part of this big elaborate scheme. That doesn't seem like something that most likely happened. Seems almost like a cover-up to help cover up whatever that person's identity is. In a new Jacuzzi Telegram channel created shortly afterwards, a pinned message appears to confirm that the administrator, Shiny Hunters, had quit after wishing to no longer maintain the forum. And then they're showing, if you're listening on the podcast, they're showing screenshots of what these messages look like. So definitely check that out if you're interested. This says several threat actors had attempted to use these disruptions to promote their own alternatives, such as secret forums and Breach Nation. So a lot of things going on here. So first of all, the Shiny Hunters, the person that runs breach forums, saying that they're kind of going away, that they are they're feeling the heat in a sense and feel like they could get caught if they continue to do what they're doing. And certainly we've seen that with other forums and other locations. Typically, it doesn't happen that way, though. They don't typically shut it down and say the heat got too much. They kind of get overconfident with their OPSEC or their operations security, thinking that they're not going to get caught, or saying they've tuned up their operations security, and then next thing you know, bam, they're taken down. So, that's typically what we see. So this is certainly interesting, kind of putting ego aside and quitting before it gets too bad, supposedly. But I do wonder, what kind of has shiny hunters spooked? Like, did they see something or see some kind of other indicator that maybe the FBI or one of these law enforcement agencies has gotten really close to finding out who they are? It's always interesting. I don't know if we'll find that out. I imagine once they get busted, we will find out because, again, I've said this on this show before, but these law enforcement agencies are getting so good at tracking people down. It may take some time, but with all honesty, you're probably going to get busted at some point. Most criminals can't run forever, and most of them leave enough clues that eventually they're going to get tracked down. So we'll see what happens with this. But then again, breach forums get shut down, and then we see other groups kind of swooping in saying, hey, breach forums is down. You should come over to our platform and you should use our platform because now we are the big dogs in town. So, really interesting to see kind of this shift or this new marketing promotion from these other groups. Somebody's got to take over, right? Somebody's got to take over the dark web. So, very interesting indeed. So, with that being said, that's the last article for today's episode. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 49. We're almost at 50. This is 49. So the next episode is going to be 50. This is Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. And I hope you've enjoyed the content. I hope you've gotten something out of it. And I will see you in the next one. See you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.